You know what separates people who constantly feel drained, anxious, and stuck from those who seem to glide through life with an almost unfair advantage? It's not their IQ. It's not their bank account. It's not even their connections or lucky breaks. It's something so simple yet so rare that most people completely overlook it their entire lives. Picture this. You're in a heated meeting. Your colleague just took credit for your work. Right there, in front of your boss, in front of the entire team. Your heart's racing, your face is burning, every fiber of your being wants to explode, to call them out, to defend yourself right now. And here's where everything changes. Because what you do in the next 5 seconds will either make you or break you. It'll either put you in control or hand all your power to someone else on a silver platter. The person who lacks this advantage, they react, they snap, they create a scene. And 20 minutes later, they're the problem, not the person who stole their work. But the person with the silent advantage, they pause, they breathe, they respond with precision. And by the end of that meeting, everyone in the room knows exactly what happened, without a single raised voice. That's the difference we're talking about today. And by the time you finish this, you'll understand why the calmest person in the room is always the most dangerous. Let's get into it. Lesson 1. Respond, don't react. Here's something nobody tells you when you're growing up. Your emotional reactions are being studied every single day by your boss, your partner, your friends, even strangers on the street. They're watching how you handle pressure, how you deal with criticism, how you respond when things don't go your way. And based on what they see, they're making decisions about you, whether to promote you, whether to trust you, whether to respect you. Think about the last time someone said something that really got under your skin. Maybe it was your partner making a sarcastic comment during an argument. Maybe it was a family member criticizing your life choices at dinner. Maybe it was a stranger cutting you off in traffic. What did you do? If you're like most people, you reacted. You felt that surge of anger or frustration, and you let it out. You said something cutting back. You honked your horn. You sent that angry text message you've been composing in your head, and for about 30 seconds, it felt good. It felt like justice, like you were standing up for yourself. But then what happened? The argument escalated. The relationship got more strained. You said things you didn't mean. And 3 hours later, you're lying in bed, replaying the whole thing in your head, thinking, why did I say that? Why did I let them get to me? Here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. Every time you react instead of respond, you're giving someone else the remote control to your emotions. Think about that for a second. You're literally handing over the power to control how you feel, what you say, and what you do to another person. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and suddenly they're deciding whether you have a good morning or a bad morning. Your coworker makes a snide remark, and suddenly they're controlling whether you're productive or distracted for the next 2 hours. Does that sound like power to you? Does that sound like control? Because it's not. It's the opposite. Let me tell you about Marcus. He's a project manager at a tech company in Austin, Texas. Smart guy, hardworking. But he had this problem. He couldn't handle criticism. Anytime someone questioned his decisions in a meeting, his face would turn red. His voice would get louder. He'd get defensive, interrupt people, sometimes even raise his voice. His team started calling him reactive Marcus behind his back. Not because he was a bad manager, he wasn't, but because everyone knew that if you pushed the right button, Marcus would explode. And that made him predictable, controllable, weak. One day, Marcus's boss pulled him aside. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told him, "Marcus, you're brilliant at what you do, but until you learn to control your reactions, you're never getting promoted. Because leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the calmest." That conversation changed everything for Marcus. He started doing something radical. He started pausing. Just 5 seconds. That's it. Whenever someone said something that triggered him, instead of immediately responding, he'd pause. He'd take a breath. He'd count to 5 in his head. And in those 5 seconds, something miraculous happened. The emotional wave would crest and start to recede. The urge to snap back would lose its grip. And suddenly, he could see the situation clearly. 3 months later, Marcus got promoted. Not because he became a different person, but because he learned one simple truth. The gap between stimulus and response is where your power lives. Let me break this down for you because it's crucial. When something happens, someone insults you, something goes wrong, you face a setback, there's a moment, a tiny, almost invisible moment between what happened and how you respond. For most people, this gap doesn't exist. They've trained themselves to react so quickly that stimulus and response feel like the same thing. But they're not. That gap is where your freedom lives. That's where your choice lives. That's where your power lives. When you react, you're running on autopilot. Your amygdala, the primitive emotional part of your brain, takes over. It's the same part of your brain that would help you run from a tiger. It's fast, it's powerful, and it's absolutely terrible at making nuanced decisions in complex social situations. But when you respond, you're engaging your prefrontal cortex, the rational, strategic, long-term thinking part of your brain, the part that can see the bigger picture, the part that can choose words carefully, the part that can turn a potential disaster into an opportunity. Here's a real-world example from my own life. I was working at an advertising agency in New York a few years back. We'd just landed this massive client, a European luxury car brand. Our team had been working around the clock for 3 weeks on this pitch. Late nights, weekends, the whole deal. The day before the final presentation, my creative director, let's call him Ryan, called me into his office. He told me he was pulling me from the presentation team and putting in someone else. His reason? I need someone with more experience on this one. I'd been with the company for 4 years. The person he was replacing me with had been there for 6 months. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, all that work, all those late nights. And now I wasn't even going to be in the room to see it through. The old me, the me from 5 years ago, would have exploded, would have argued, would have made it about respect and fairness and all the sacrifices I'd made. But I paused. I took a breath. I counted to 10 this time, not 5. And then I asked a simple question. Can I ask, what specifically made you feel I wasn't the right fit for this presentation? Ryan looked uncomfortable. He started talking about executive presence and client relationships. And as he talked, I listened, really listened, not planning my counter-argument, not getting defensive, just listening. And here's what I realized. Ryan wasn't trying to hurt me. He was scared. This was the biggest client the agency had landed in years. If this presentation failed, it would be on him. He was making the decision based on fear, not on my actual abilities. So instead of fighting him, I said, I understand. This is a high-stakes presentation, and you need to feel confident in the team. I respect that. But I'd like to propose something. Let me be in the room not as a presenter, but as support. I know this pitch inside and out. If there are questions I can help with, I'll be there. If not, I'll stay quiet. Ryan agreed. The presentation happened. It went well, until the client asked a technical question about the digital strategy that stumped everyone except me. I had the answer because I'd been in the weeds of this project for 3 weeks. I gave the answer. The client loved it. We won the account. A week later, Ryan promoted me to senior creative strategist. Here's what would have happened if I'd reacted instead of responded. I would have argued with Ryan. Maybe I would have convinced him to keep me on the presentation team, maybe not. But either way, I would have damaged the relationship. I would have created tension. I would have made Ryan feel attacked and defensive. Instead, by responding, by pausing, listening, and finding a strategic solution, I turned a setback into an opportunity. I showed Ryan exactly the kind of executive presence he was looking for, not by arguing about it, but by demonstrating it. That's the power of response over reaction. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but doesn't this mean I'm being passive? Doesn't this mean I'm letting people walk all over me? Absolutely not. Responding instead of reacting doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you don't stand up for yourself. It means you're choosing the battlefield. It means you're fighting smart instead of fighting hard. Let me give you another example. Sarah is a corporate lawyer in Chicago. She works in a male-dominated firm where interruptions in meetings are common, guys talking over her, guys taking credit for her ideas, the whole toxic playbook. The other women in her firm dealt with this in different ways. Some got angry and confrontational. Some just accepted it and stayed quiet. Neither approach worked well. Sarah did something different. When someone interrupted her in a meeting, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't say, "Excuse me, I wasn't finished." She simply paused, looked directly at the person who interrupted, and waited. The silence would stretch out. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Everyone in the room would feel it, and then calmly, she'd say, "I'd like to finish my point." And she would. The first few times she did this, people were surprised. But here's what happened over time. People stopped interrupting her, not because she'd yelled at them or reported them to HR, but because she'd made interrupting her uncomfortable. She'd made it awkward. She'd made it costly. She'd trained her colleagues through her responses, not her reactions. Within 2 years, Sarah made partner. She was the youngest woman in the firm's history to do so. Here's the framework I want you to take away from this lesson. Reaction equals emotion plus immediate action equals short-term relief plus long-term regret. Response equals pause plus evaluation plus strategic action equals short-term discomfort plus long-term power. The magic is in the pause. That pause can be 5 seconds. It can be 5 minutes. It can be 5 days. It depends on the situation. But the pause is non-negotiable. In that pause, you're asking yourself 3 questions. 1, what is actually happening here? Not what I feel is happening, but what is objectively happening. 2. What do I actually want from this situation? Not what my ego wants, but what my best self wants. 3. What action will get me closer to that outcome? Not what will feel good right now, but what will serve me long term. These 3 questions will save your career. They'll save your relationships. They'll save you from yourself. Let me show you how this works in everyday situations. Situation: your partner criticizes how you loaded the dishwasher. Reaction: are you serious right now? I just spent an hour cleaning the kitchen and this is what you focus on. Response: pause. I appreciate you wanting things done a certain way. Can you show me how you prefer it? That way we're on the same page next time. See the difference? The reaction creates a fight. The response creates connection. Situation: your boss gives you critical feedback on a project you worked hard on. Reaction: that's not fair. I put in so much effort on this. You don't even understand how much work this was. Response: pause. I want to make sure I understand the feedback clearly so I can improve. Can you give me specific examples of what could have been better? The reaction makes you defensive and unteachable. The response makes you coachable and promotable. Situation: someone cuts you off in traffic. Reaction: honking, cursing, speeding up to cut them off back, ruining your own morning. Response: pause. That person might be rushing to the hospital, or they might just be a bad driver. Either way, it has nothing to do with me. Moving on. The reaction gives a stranger control over your emotional state. The response keeps you in control. Here's what I've learned after years of practicing this. Most situations that feel urgent aren't actually urgent at all. Your brain is lying to you. Your emotions are telling you that you need to respond right now, or something terrible will happen. But that's almost never true. That email that made you angry, it can wait an hour before you respond. That comment from your family member, you can address it tomorrow when you've had time to think. That confrontation at work, you can sleep on it and come back with a clear head. The world will not end if you take time to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting immediately. In fact, here's a secret that took me years to learn. The more important the situation, the more time you should take to respond. If it's a career-defining decision, take days or weeks. If it's a relationship-defining conversation, take the time to think through what you really want to say. If it's something that will impact your life for years, why would you trust your immediate emotional reaction to guide you? You wouldn't make a major financial investment based on how you felt in the moment. You'd research, you'd analyze, you'd take time to make sure it's the right decision. Why would you treat your words, your actions, and your relationships with any less care? Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This is hard, especially at first. Your entire nervous system is wired for immediate reaction. It's a survival mechanism. When our ancestors saw a snake, they didn't pause to evaluate their options. They jumped back. That instant reaction saved lives. But here's the thing. You're not facing snakes anymore. You're facing emails and meetings and difficult conversations, and those require a completely different skill set. The good news is that response, like any skill, can be trained. Start small. Start with low-stakes situations. The next time someone makes a mildly annoying comment, practice the pause. Count to 5. Take a breath. Then respond. It'll feel weird at first. It'll feel slow. You might even feel like you're being passive or weak. You're not. You're building a muscle that will serve you for the rest of your life. Over time, you'll notice something incredible. The pause gets easier. It becomes automatic. And eventually, you'll find yourself naturally responding instead of reacting, even in high-pressure situations. That's when your whole life changes. Because here's the ultimate truth about this lesson. People who react are predictable. People who respond are powerful. When you're reactive, people know exactly how to manipulate you. They know which buttons to push. They know how to get you angry, defensive, or rattled, and they'll use that knowledge to control you. But when you're responsive, you become unpredictable. People can't push your buttons because you're not running on buttons anymore. You're running on conscious choice, and that makes you dangerous in the best possible way. You become someone who can't be controlled, someone who can't be manipulated, someone who operates from a place of strength, not emotion. And that, my friend, is the silent advantage. Lesson 2. The energy economy. Let's talk about something that nobody teaches you in school, but that will determine the quality of your entire life. Energy management. Not time management, not productivity hacks, not morning routines. Energy. Because here's a truth that most people learn way too late. You don't have an unlimited supply of energy. Every single day, you wake up with a fixed amount. And how you spend that energy determines everything. Think of your energy like a bank account. Every morning, you get a deposit. Let's call it 100 energy units. That's all you get for the day. You can't borrow from tomorrow. You can't get a loan. Once it's gone, it's gone. Now, here's where most people screw this up completely. They wake up, check their phone, and immediately spend 20 energy units on anxiety about emails they haven't responded to yet. They get into an argument with their partner about something trivial. There goes another 15 units. They stress about traffic on the way to work. Another 10 units. They engage in a pointless debate with a coworker about whose job is harder. Another 20 units. It's 10 a.m., and they've already burned through 65 energy units on absolutely nothing that matters. And then they wonder why they feel exhausted by lunchtime, why they don't have the energy to work out after work, why they can't focus on their side project, why they're too drained to be present with their kids. It's not because they did too much. It's because they wasted their energy on things that don't deserve it. Let me tell you about my friend David. David works in finance in London, high-pressure job, long hours, the whole deal. For years, he was a guy who was always complaining about being exhausted, always tired, always stressed, always running on fumes. I'd see him on weekends, and he'd be absolutely wiped out. Not from working. He had plenty of colleagues who worked the same hours and seemed fine. David was wiped out from something else. One day, I asked him to track his energy for a week. Not his time, his energy. Every time he felt his energy drop, I wanted him to write down what caused it. At the end of the week, he showed me his notes. And it was eye-opening. Do you know what was draining David's energy more than anything else? It wasn't the actual work. It wasn't the long hours. It wasn't even the difficult clients. It was drama, office politics, pointless arguments, gossiping about colleagues, getting worked up about things he couldn't control, complaining about company decisions, stressing about other people's opinions of him. David was spending probably 60% of his daily energy on things that had zero impact on his actual results. I told him, David, you're not tired from working. You're tired from caring about things that don't matter. That hit him hard. So we did an experiment. For 1 month, David committed to an energy diet. Every time he was about to engage in something, he'd ask himself one simple question. Is this worth my energy? If the answer was no, he'd disengage. No explanation, no justification, just disengage. Co-worker trying to pull him into office gossip? Is this worth my energy? No. Walk away. Someone trying to start an argument about politics in the break room? Is this worth my energy? No. Stay out of it. Getting worked up about a decision his boss made that he couldn't change? Is this worth my energy? No. Accept it and move on. Within 2 weeks, David noticed something incredible. He wasn't exhausted anymore. Same job, same hours, same responsibilities. But he had energy left over at the end of the day. He started going to the gym again. He started working on a business idea he'd been thinking about for years. He was more present with his girlfriend. He was sleeping better. His life didn't change because he did less. It changed because he stopped wasting energy on things that didn't matter. Here's what most people don't understand. Emotional reactions are incredibly expensive from an energy perspective. When you get angry, your body goes into fight or flight mode. Your heart rate increases. Your blood pressure rises. Stress hormones flood your system. Your digestion slows down. Your immune system is suppressed. All of that requires massive amounts of energy. And here's the kicker. Your body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat. Getting cut off in traffic triggers the same stress response as being chased by a predator. So when you react emotionally to small things throughout your day, someone's rude comment, a frustrating email, a delayed train, you're putting your body through multiple fight-or-flight episodes. Each one drains your energy reserves. By the end of the day, you haven't been chased by predators. You haven't fought for your life. But your body feels like you have. That's why you're exhausted. Calm people understand this intuitively. They're not calm because they don't care about anything. They're calm because they've learned to conserve your energy for things that actually matter. They've learned to ask, is this worth the physiological stress response? Is this worth the mental bandwidth? Is this worth the emotional investment? And most of the time the answer is no. Let me give you a framework I use. I call it the energy ROI analysis. Every time you're about to engage in something, a conversation, an argument, a worry, a task, ask yourself, what's my return on investment for the energy I'm about to spend? If someone's trying to start an argument with you, what's the ROI? Maybe you win the argument. Maybe you prove you're right. Maybe you get to feel superior for 30 seconds. But what did it cost you? Stress, tension, ruined mood, damaged relationship. 2 hours of ruminating about it afterwards, difficulty focusing on your actual work. That's a terrible ROI. Compare that to just letting it go, not engaging, staying calm. What did that cost you? Nothing, literally nothing. What did you gain? Peace of mind, conserved energy, maintained relationship, ability to focus on what matters, reputation as someone who doesn't get rattled. That's an incredible ROI. Here's another example from my own life. I used to be a chronic overthinker, especially about social situations. Did I say the wrong thing at that party? Does my boss think I'm incompetent? Why didn't that person text me back? On and on and on. Do you know how much energy that consumed? massive amounts. Hours and hours of mental energy, spinning through scenarios, analyzing conversations, worrying about outcomes I had zero control over. One day I calculated it. I was probably spending 2 to 3 hours a day on anxious overthinking. That's 15 to 20 hours a week. That's almost a full-time job's worth of energy spent on nothing. Absolutely nothing productive. So I made a rule. If I can't take action on it right now, I don't spend energy thinking about it. Someone hasn't texted me back? Can I do anything about it right now other than wait? No. So I'm not thinking about it. Worried about how a presentation will go next week? Can I do anything about it right now other than prepare? No. So I'm not worrying about it. Concerned about what someone thinks of me? Can I control their thoughts? No. So I'm not spending energy on it. This rule alone probably gave me back 15 hours of mental energy per week. That's 15 hours I could spend on things that actually move my life forward. Learning new skills, building relationships, working on projects, being creative, actually enjoying my life. Now, I want to be clear about something. Conserving your energy doesn't mean being passive or apathetic. Some things are worth your energy. Some battles are worth fighting. Some situations do require your full emotional investment. The key is being selective. Let me tell you about Elena. She's a civil rights attorney in San Francisco. Her job is literally to fight, to argue, to push back against injustice. You'd think someone in her position would be constantly drained, constantly exhausted from all the conflict. But Elena is one of the calmest, most centered people I know. How? Because she's incredibly selective about where she spends her energy. At work, fighting for her clients? Full energy? Every ounce. She'll work 70-hour weeks. She'll battle in court. She'll pour everything into cases that matter. But outside of work, she's completely different. Someone's rude to her at the coffee shop. She doesn't engage, not worth her energy. Family member trying to start a political argument at dinner? She deflects, not worth her energy. Internet stranger disagreeing with something she posted? She doesn't even respond. Definitely not worth her energy. Elena understands something crucial. She has important battles to fight. She can't afford to waste energy on meaningless skirmishes. She needs every ounce of her energy for the things that actually matter. So she protects it fiercely. This is the mindset shift I want you to make. Treat your energy like the precious, limited resource that it is. You wouldn't give away your life savings to every person who asks for money, would you? Of course not. You'd be selective. You'd think carefully about where your money goes. Your energy deserves the same respect. Here are the biggest energy drains that most people don't even realize are draining them. 1. Toxic people. You know who I'm talking about. The person who only calls when they need something. The friend who always has drama. The coworker who complains constantly but never does anything to improve their situation. The family member who criticizes every decision you make. These people are energy vampires. Every interaction leaves you feeling drained. Calm people set boundaries with energy vampires. They limit exposure. They don't engage with the drama. They protect their energy. 2. Unnecessary decisions. Did you know that making decisions uses energy? It's called decision fatigue. Every choice you make throughout the day, what to wear, what to eat, which task to do first, depletes your mental energy. This is why Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day. Why Barack Obama wore only blue or gray suits as president. They were conserving decision-making energy for the decisions that actually mattered. Calm people automate or simplify as many decisions as possible. They create routines. They establish defaults. They save their decision-making energy for the big stuff. 3. Multitasking. Here's a truth that productivity culture doesn't want you to know. Multitasking is a myth. Your brain can't actually focus on multiple things at once. What you're doing is task switching, and every switch costs energy. Studies show that it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully refocus after an interruption. So, if you're constantly switching between tasks, checking your phone, responding to messages while trying to work, you're hemorrhaging energy. Calm people protect their focus. They batch similar tasks. They turn off notifications. They create blocks of uninterrupted time. They understand that deep focus conserves energy while scattered attention drains it. 4. Unresolved conflicts. That argument you had with your partner last week that you never fully resolved? That tension with your coworker that you're both pretending doesn't exist? That thing your friend said that hurt your feelings but you never addressed? All of that is running in the background of your mind, constantly consuming energy. It's like having 20 browser tabs open on your computer. Even if you're not actively looking at them, they're slowing everything down. Calm people address conflicts directly and quickly, not because they love confrontation, but because they understand that unresolved tension is an energy leak they can't afford. 5. Comparison. Scrolling through social media, comparing your life to others, worrying about whether you're as successful as your college classmates, feeling envious of someone else's relationship, body, career, lifestyle. Comparison is one of the fastest ways to drain your energy because it's a game you can never win. There will always be someone who has more, does more, or is more than you in some dimension. Calm people opt out of the comparison game entirely. They focus on their own path. They measure themselves against their own standards, not someone else's highlight reel. Let me share with you one of the most powerful practices I've adopted for energy conservation, the 24-hour rule. Whenever something happens that triggers a strong emotional reaction, I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm anxious, I give myself 24 hours before I respond or make any decisions. Not 24 hours to stew in the emotion, 24 hours to let the emotion settle so I can see the situation clearly. Here's what I've discovered. About 80% of the things that feel urgent and critical in the moment don't even matter 24 hours later. That email that made me furious? 24 hours later, I realize it was just poorly worded, not malicious. That criticism that crushed me? 24 hours later, I can see the valid points in it. That decision that felt so pressing? 24 hours later, I have much more clarity about the right path forward. By waiting, I avoid wasting energy on emotional reactions that don't serve me. I avoid saying things I'd regret. I avoid making impulsive decisions I'd have to walk back. That 24-hour buffer has probably saved me hundreds of hours of energy that I would have otherwise wasted on damage control. Here's another principle that calm people live by. Energy follows attention. Whatever you focus on, you're feeding energy into. If you spend your day focused on problems, complaints, and everything that's wrong, you'll feel drained. If you spend your day focused on solutions, progress, and opportunities, you'll feel energized. It's not about toxic positivity or pretending problems don't exist. It's about being strategic with where you direct your mental energy. I had a colleague once, let's call him Brett, who was brilliant but exhausting to be around. Every conversation with Brett was about what was wrong. The company's terrible decisions, the incompetent management, the unfair policies, the broken systems. And you know what? Brett was usually right. The things he complained about were legitimate problems. But here's what Brett didn't understand. Being right about problems doesn't make you powerful. Solving problems makes you powerful. Brett spent 90% of his energy identifying and complaining about problems, and maybe 10% actually solving them. Meanwhile, there were other people in the company spending 90% of their energy on solutions. Guess who got promoted? Guess who became exhausted and bitter? Calm people don't ignore problems. They acknowledge them, but then they immediately shift to, what can I do about this? If they can't do anything about it, they accept it and move on. They don't waste energy being upset about things outside their control. This is called the circle of concern versus circle of control. Your circle of concern includes everything you care about: the economy, politics, climate change, what other people think of you, how your company is run, whether it's going to rain tomorrow. Your circle of control includes only the things you can actually influence: your own actions, your own attitude, how you spend your time, how you respond to situations. Most people spend most of their energy in their circle of concern, worrying about things they can't change, getting worked up about things outside their control. Calm people focus almost exclusively on their circle of control. They accept what they can't change, and they pour their energy into what they can. This doesn't make them passive, it makes them effective. Let me give you a practical example of how this plays out. The economy is struggling, inflation is high, job market is uncertain. These are legitimate concerns. Anxious person's response spends hours doom-scrolling economic news, argues with people online about whose fault it is, stresses about potential layoffs, complains about the cost of everything, energy spent, massive. Result, feeling helpless and drained. Calm person's response acknowledges the economic situation, asks, what can I control here? Updates their resume, builds new skills, cuts unnecessary expenses, builds their emergency fund, has conversations with their manager about their value. Energy spent, focused, and productive. Result, feeling prepared and empowered. Same situation, completely different energy expenditure, completely different outcome. Here's what I want you to understand. Your energy is your most valuable asset, more valuable than your time, because you can have all the time in the world, but without energy, you can't do anything meaningful with it. More valuable than your money, because you can make more money, but you can't make more energy beyond what your body naturally produces. More valuable than your talent, because talent without energy is just potential that never gets actualized. So protect it. Guard it. Be ruthless about where it goes. Say no to things that drain you. Say yes to things that energize you. Set boundaries with people who take more than they give. Minimize exposure to things that stress you out unnecessarily. Build your life around energy preservation, not just time management. Because here's the final truth about energy. The person who conserves their energy wins, not because they did more, but because they wasted less, not because they worked harder, but because they worked smarter, not because they had more resources, but because they allocated them better. The silent advantage isn't about having unlimited energy. It's about spending the energy you have on things that actually matter. That's how you go from exhausted to energized, from scattered to focused, from overwhelmed to in control. And that changes everything. Lesson 3. The weapon nobody sees. Here's something that's going to sound counterintuitive in a world that glorifies being loud, being seen, and being heard. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is absolutely nothing. Not nothing in a passive, defeated way, but nothing in a strategic, intentional, I know exactly what I'm doing way. Silence. We live in a culture that's terrified of silence. We fill every moment with noise, with words, with opinions, with reactions. We think that if we're not constantly talking, posting, sharing, commenting, we're somehow missing out or falling behind. But here's what calm people know that anxious people don't. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is power. Let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates this. A few years ago, I was consulting for a tech startup in Seattle. The company was going through a rough patch. Investors were getting nervous, the board was divided on strategy, and there was talk of replacing the CEO. The CEO, a woman named Catherine, called an emergency board meeting. Everyone expected fireworks. Everyone expected her to come out swinging, defending herself, making her case, trying to save her position. The meeting started. One board member immediately launched into criticism, then another, then another. They listed everything that was going wrong. They questioned her decisions. They implied she was in over her head, and Catherine, she said nothing. She sat there completely calm, making eye contact with each person as they spoke. Not defensive, not angry, not fidgeting, just present, silent, listening. The criticism went on for maybe 20 minutes. It felt like an hour. And then something interesting happened. The board members ran out of steam. They'd said everything they wanted to say, and Catherine still hadn't responded. The silence became heavy, uncomfortable. One board member started shifting in his seat. Another started backtracking slightly on some of his harsher comments. Finally, the chairman of the board said, "Catherine, don't you have anything to say?" And Catherine, in the calmest voice you can imagine, said, "I wanted to make sure everyone had the chance to fully express their concerns. I've been listening carefully. Now let me tell you what we're going to do." She then laid out a clear strategic plan, 3 specific initiatives, concrete timelines, measurable outcomes. She spoke for maybe 5 minutes total. The board approved her plan unanimously. She kept her position. 6 months later, the company was profitable. You know what Catherine told me afterwards? The moment I started defending myself, I would have lost. Because defense implies you're on the back foot. But by staying silent, by letting them exhaust themselves, I controlled the entire room without saying a word. That's the power of silence. Most people think power comes from talking, from asserting, from making sure your voice is heard. And sometimes that's true. But calm people understand something deeper. The person who talks the most usually has the least power in a room. Think about it. Who talks more in a negotiation? The desperate party or a confident one? Who talks more in an argument? The person who's secure in their position or the person who's trying to convince themselves they're right? Who talks more when they're nervous, when they're insecure, when they're trying to fill the void? Talking, especially excessive talking, is often a sign of weakness, not strength. Silence, on the other hand, is a sign of self-control, and self-control is the foundation of all real power. Let me break down the psychology of why silence is so powerful. 1. Silence creates discomfort, and discomfort makes people reveal themselves. Human beings are hardwired to fill silence. When there's a gap in conversation, we feel compelled to fill it. It's uncomfortable. It creates anxiety. And when people are uncomfortable, they talk, they overshare, they reveal information they didn't intend to reveal. They show their cards. I learned this technique from a friend who's an FBI interrogator. You know what he told me? In interrogations, the person who's comfortable with silence wins. We ask a question, and then we wait. Most people can't handle more than 7 to 10 seconds of silence. They'll start talking just to fill the void. And that's when they tell us everything. The same principle applies in everyday life. In salary negotiations, the person who speaks first after the offer is made usually loses. The silence is pressure. Whoever breaks first shows their hand. In conflicts, the person who stays calm and silent while the other person rants and raves, they're gathering information. They're learning exactly what buttons to push, or more importantly, what buttons not to push. In relationships, when someone is lying or hiding something, they'll often talk excessively to cover it up. The person asking questions and staying silent, they're noticing the inconsistencies. 2. Silence signals confidence. When you immediately respond to everything, you look reactive. You look like you need to defend yourself. You look insecure. But when you can hear criticism, accusations, or challenges and remain silent, that's confidence. It says, I'm so secure in myself that I don't need to immediately defend or explain. I can sit with your opinion of me without falling apart. I saw this play out brilliantly with a colleague named James. James is a software engineer in Boston, and he's one of the calmest people I've ever met. At one company meeting, a project manager publicly blamed James for a bug that crashed a major feature. In front of the entire team, this guy went on a rant about how James's code was sloppy and unprofessional. Everyone in the room was waiting for James to defend himself, to explain, to push back. James said nothing. He just sat there, completely relaxed, looking at the project manager with mild interest, like he was watching a mildly entertaining TV show. The project manager kept talking, getting more and more worked up. James kept saying nothing. Finally, someone else on the team spoke up. Actually, I reviewed that code yesterday. The bug wasn't in James's module. It was in the integration layer that Tom built. The project manager's face went red. He tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. He looked foolish, reactionary, unprofessional. James? He looked unshakable, mature, completely in control. After the meeting, I asked James why he didn't defend himself immediately. He said, "Why would I? I knew it wasn't my bug. I knew someone would figure that out. By staying quiet, I let him expose himself. If I'd gotten defensive, even though I was right, I would have looked just as emotional as him. This way, he looked like the problem, not me." That's strategic silence. 3. Silence gives you time to think. This is huge, and most people completely overlook it. When you're constantly talking, you're operating on autopilot. You're reacting. You're not thinking deeply about what you're saying or how you're saying it. But when you're silent, your brain has space to actually process, to analyze, to strategize. Let me give you a personal example. I used to be the person who always had an immediate answer. Someone would ask me a question, and I'd respond instantly. I thought it made me look smart and quick. Then I started noticing something. My immediate answers were often wrong or incomplete, or I'd think of a much better answer 5 minutes later and kick myself for not saying that instead. So I started implementing a simple practice, the 3-second pause. Whenever someone asks me a question, especially an important one, I pause for at least 3 seconds before responding. Just 3 seconds. It doesn't sound like much, but it's revolutionary. In those 3 seconds, my brain does this. Is this a trap question? What's the best answer here? Not just the first answer. What does this person really want to know? How can I answer in a way that serves both of us? 3 seconds of silence has saved me from countless stupid responses. And here's what's interesting. People don't perceive the pause as slowness or confusion. They perceive it as thoughtfulness. It actually makes me seem more intelligent, not less. 4. Silence is mysterious, and mystery is power. Think about the people in your life who you find most compelling, the ones who have that indefinable charisma, that gravitational pull. I bet most of them aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who talk the least. They listen more than they speak. When they do speak, it's measured, intentional. They don't over-explain. They don't overshare. They leave gaps. They leave you wanting more. That's the power of mystery. When you tell people everything, every thought, every feeling, every detail of your life, you remove all mystery. You become predictable. And predictability is the death of fascination. But when you're selective with your words, when you're comfortable with silence, when you don't feel the need to fill every conversational gap, you become intriguing. People lean in. They pay more attention when you do speak because your words are rare, which makes them valuable. I learned this from watching a mentor of mine, a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley named Michael. Michael is one of the most influential people in tech, and he's also one of the quietest people I've ever met. In meetings, he'll sit for an hour and say maybe 3 sentences total. But when he speaks, the entire room goes silent. Everyone leans forward. Everyone listens. Because they know that if Michael is speaking, it's important. His words have weight because they're rare. Compare that to the people who talk constantly in meetings. You know the ones. They have an opinion on everything. They jump in every 5 seconds. They dominate the conversation. And you know what happens? People tune them out. Their words become background noise. Even when they say something important, nobody notices because they've trained everyone to stop listening. 5. Silence shifts the burden of proof. This is a tactical use of silence that calm people employ brilliantly. When someone makes an accusation or an aggressive statement, the natural instinct is to defend yourself, to explain, to justify. But here's what happens when you do that. You've accepted the burden of proof. You've agreed that you need to defend yourself, which implies there might be something to defend against. Calm people flip this script by saying nothing. Someone makes an accusatory statement, and you just look at them calmly, waiting. The burden of proof shifts back to them. Now they have to prove what they're claiming. They have to back it up. They have to fill the silence. And often they can't. Their accusation falls flat because it wasn't based on solid ground to begin with. It was emotional, reactive, unsupported. Your silence exposed that. Let me give you a real-world example of how I used this technique. I was freelancing for a client who was notoriously difficult. One day, he called me up, angry, saying that I'd missed a deadline and this was completely unacceptable, and he was reconsidering our entire working relationship. The old me would have immediately gotten defensive, would have explained why the deadline wasn't actually missed, or what miscommunication happened, or whatever. Instead, I said nothing. I just listened, and when he finished his rant, I stayed silent for probably 5 seconds. Then, very calmly, I said, "Which deadline are you referring to?" Silence from his end. Then, "Well, the deliverable I asked for." Me. "The deliverable that we agreed would be delivered by the 15th? The one I sent you on the 13th? Long silence. Then, "Oh, I must have missed that email. Let me check my inbox." He found the email I'd delivered early. He apologized awkwardly, and we moved on. But here's the key. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I just let his accusation hang in the air until he realized it was baseless. If I'd immediately gotten defensive, the conversation would have gone completely differently. It would have been an argument. It would have damaged the relationship. My silence forced him to fact-check himself, and it preserved my dignity and our working relationship. Now, let me be very clear about something. Strategic silence is not the same as passive silence. Passive silence is when you don't speak because you're afraid, because you don't know what to say, because you're intimidated. Strategic silence is when you choose not to speak because you know that silence serves you better than words would. The difference is intention. Passive silence comes from weakness. Strategic silence comes from strength. You can tell the difference by looking at someone's body language. Passive silence looks like avoiding eye contact, fidgeting, appearing nervous or uncomfortable, closed body language. Strategic silence looks like steady eye contact, relaxed posture, appearing completely comfortable, open body language, a slight sense of controlled intensity. One signals, "I don't know what to do." The other signals, "I know exactly what I'm doing." Here's a framework for when to use strategic silence. Use silence when someone is making an accusation and you want them to prove it. You're in a negotiation and you've made your offer. Someone is emotional and needs to vent without your reaction fueling them. You need time to think before responding. Someone is trying to provoke you, and you want to deny them the satisfaction. You want to signal that you're not rattled by criticism or pressure. You're listening and gathering information. Don't use silence when someone needs reassurance or emotional support. Clarity or explanation would genuinely help the situation. Your silence could be misinterpreted as agreement with something you disagree with. Quick communication is necessary for safety or urgent coordination. You're using silence as a manipulative punishment rather than a strategic choice. The key is intention. Ask yourself, am I being silent because it serves a purpose, or am I being silent because I'm afraid? Let me share one more powerful application of silence. Silence as a boundary. Some people are energy vampires. They feed on your reactions. They love drama. They love pulling you into their chaos. And you know what happens when you engage with them? When you argue, explain, defend, justify, you give them exactly what they want. You feed the drama. You validate their behavior by treating it as worthy of a response. But when you go silent, when you refuse to engage, you starve the drama. You remove the fuel. You set a boundary without having to explain or justify the boundary. I had a family member, let's call her Diane, who loved to start arguments at family gatherings. Politics, religion, personal life choices, she'd pick a fight about anything. For years, I'd engage, I'd debate, I'd try to change her mind or defend my position, and every family gathering would end with tension and exhaustion. Then I tried something different. The next time Diane started her usual routine, I just didn't engage. She made a provocative comment. I smiled slightly, said, "Interesting perspective," and went to get more coffee. She tried to pull me back in. I stayed pleasant but non-responsive. And I can see why you'd think that," became my standard replies, followed by a change of subject or a physical exit from the conversation. At first, she ramped up, got more provocative, more aggressive, but I stayed silent on the substance. I didn't take the bait. Within about 20 minutes, she gave up and moved on to someone else who would engage. And here's what happened over the following months. She stopped trying to start arguments with me. She learned that I wasn't going to give her the reaction she was looking for. I'd become a boring target. My silence trained her to stop wasting both of our time. That's the power of silence as a boundary. You don't have to argue with someone about why you won't argue with them. You just don't argue. Your silence is the boundary. Here's what I want you to take away from this lesson. Your words are valuable. Don't cheapen them by using too many. Every time you speak, you're spending currency. If you're constantly talking, your words become inflation. Lots of them in circulation, but none of them worth much. But if you speak rarely and with intention, your words become gold, scarce, valuable, listened to. Calm people understand this instinctively. They're not trying to dominate conversations. They're not trying to make sure everyone hears their opinion on everything. They're conserving their verbal currency for moments when it actually counts. And when they do speak, people listen. Because silence has given their words weight. So practice silence. Get comfortable with it. Learn to sit in a conversation without feeling the need to fill every gap. Learn to hear criticism without immediately defending. Learn to be in conflict without immediately reacting. Learn to be asked a question without immediately answering. That pause, that silence, that gap, that's where your power lives. That's the silent advantage. Lesson 4. The Eye of the Storm. Let me tell you about the worst day of my professional life. It was a Tuesday morning in March. I was running a digital marketing agency in New York with about 30 employees. We'd just landed our biggest client ever, a major European automotive brand. The contract was worth more than all our other clients combined. Everything was going perfectly, until it wasn't. At 9:47 a.m., I got a call from our lead developer. Our entire server infrastructure had crashed, not just a minor glitch, completely down. And with it, all the campaign data for our biggest client. The campaign that was supposed to launch in 48 hours. At 10:15 a.m., I got an email from our CFO. Our biggest existing client, the one that had been with us for 3 years, was pulling out. They'd been acquired by a competitor who had their own agency. 30% of our revenue gone. At 11:30 a.m., 3 of our senior team members walked into my office together. They'd gotten offers from a competitor. They were leaving, all 3 of them, in 2 weeks. By noon, word was spreading through the office. People were panicking. Slack was blowing up with worried messages. Someone was crying in the bathroom. Our office manager looked like she was about to have a panic attack. And everyone was looking at me, waiting to see how I would react. Here's what I wanted to do: freak out, completely fall apart, scream, cry, lock myself in my office, and spiral into despair about how everything was falling apart, and we were probably going to have to close the agency, and I was going to lose everything. You know what I did instead? I stood up, walked out into the main office area, and said in the calmest voice I could manage, "I need everyone to stop what they're doing and meet in the conference room in 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes were the longest 5 minutes of my life. I went into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, looked at myself in the mirror, and made a decision. I decided that no matter what I was feeling inside, I was going to be calm, because if I panicked, everyone would panic. And if everyone panicked, we were done. In the conference room, I laid out the situation, honestly, clearly, no sugarcoating. Here's where we are. Our server crashed. We have 48 hours to rebuild the campaign data. It's going to require all hands on deck and probably 2 all-nighters. We also just lost a major client, which means we need to cut costs and probably reduce team size within the next month. And yes, some key people are leaving. I paused. Let it sink in. Now, here's what we're going to do. I laid out a plan, specific steps, clear responsibilities, realistic timeline. Was it a perfect plan? No. Did I have all the answers? Absolutely not. But I was calm, focused, present. And here's what happened. The panic in the room evaporated. People started nodding, taking notes, asking practical questions instead of spiraling into anxiety. We worked around the clock for the next 2 days. The campaign launched on time. The client was impressed with how we handled the crisis. We did have to let some people go, which was devastating, but we survived. And within 6 months, we'd replaced the lost revenue and were growing again. But here's the thing I learned from that day. In chaos, people don't follow the person with all the answers. They follow the person who's calm, because calm signals something primal and powerful. This situation is manageable. We're going to be okay. And when everything around you is falling apart, that's what people desperately need to believe. This is the 4th dimension of the silent advantage, and it's perhaps the most important. Your ability to remain calm in chaos creates trust, and trust creates leadership. Let me break down why this works. When crisis hits, whether it's a work emergency, a family crisis, a personal setback, or just an overwhelming day, people's brains go into threat mode. The amygdala takes over. Rational thinking decreases. Emotional reactivity increases. In this state, people look for safety. They look for someone who seems to know what's happening, someone who seems in control. And the fastest way to signal that you're in control? Not by having all the answers, not by being the loudest or the most aggressive, by being calm. Calm in chaos is like a lighthouse in a storm. It doesn't stop the storm. but it gives people something to orient toward, a fixed point in the chaos. I saw this principle play out in an extreme way through a friend named Rachel, who's an ER nurse in Chicago. Rachel works in one of the busiest emergency rooms in the city. Gunshot wounds, car accidents, heart attacks, overdoses. She sees it all. High stress, life or death situations every single shift. I asked her once, how do you not completely fall apart? How do you stay functional when there's literal chaos and death around you? She said something I'll never forget. In the ER, we have a saying, if you're running, someone better be chasing you. If you're yelling, someone better be on fire. She explained, when a trauma comes in, the new nurses panic. They move fast, talk fast, their energy is chaotic. And you know what happens? They make mistakes. They forget steps. They contaminate the sterile field. Their panic makes everything worse. But the experienced nurses, they move with purpose, not panic. They talk clearly and calmly. Even when someone's literally dying in front of them, they stay composed because they know that their calm is contagious. If they're calm, the patient is calmer, the family is calmer, the other staff are calmer, and calm people make better decisions. That's the principle. Calm is contagious, but so is panic. As a leader, whether you're leading a team, a family, a project, or just yourself, you set the emotional temperature of the room. If you're anxious, everyone around you will become anxious. If you're angry, everyone around you will become defensive or combative. If you're panicked, everyone around you will panic. But if you're calm, you give everyone around you permission to be calm too. This doesn't mean you fake calmness or suppress legitimate emotions. It means you manage your own emotional state so it serves the situation instead of making it worse. Let me give you a personal example from a different domain. Parenting. My sister Jennifer has 3 kids under the age of 7. If you've ever spent time around young kids, you know they're chaos incarnate. Emotional meltdowns, fighting, accidents, noise, mess. It's constant. I watched Jennifer handle a situation once that perfectly illustrated this principle. Her middle kid, Emma, was having a massive tantrum, screaming, crying, throwing toys. The reason? Her older brother had gotten a slightly bigger cookie than her. Now, the natural response, the one I probably would have had, is to either A, get frustrated and yell at her to stop being ridiculous, B, try to frantically fix it by getting her a bigger cookie, C. Launch into a lecture about fairness and gratitude, Jennifer did none of these things. She calmly walked over, sat down next to Emma, who was still screaming, and just sat there, calm, present, not trying to stop the tantrum but not feeding into it either. Emma screamed for maybe another 30 seconds, then started winding down. The screams became crying. The crying became sniffles. And then Jennifer, in the calmest voice, said, "That felt really unfair, didn't it?" Emma nodded, tears still on her face. "It's hard when we feel like things aren't fair. I get that." Long pause. "Do you want to talk about it, or do you want a hug?" Emma chose the hug. Crisis over. Total time elapsed, maybe 3 minutes. Afterward, I asked Jennifer how she stayed so calm when Emma was losing it. She said, "Because one of us has to be the adult. If I match her energy, now we're both having a tantrum. But if I stay calm, it shows her that these big feelings are manageable, that she's safe, and that helps her calm down way faster than if I yelled at her or tried to fix it immediately." This principle applies to way more than parenting. It applies to every situation where emotions are running high. Your calm shows people that the situation is manageable, even when it feels overwhelming. Now, let me be clear about something important. Being calm in chaos doesn't mean being passive. Some people confuse calmness with inaction. They think, if I'm calm, that means I'm just accepting bad situations and not doing anything about them. That's not what we're talking about at all. Calm is not passive. Calm is strategic. Being calm means you're making decisions from a place of clarity instead of panic. It means you're responding to the actual situation instead of your fear of the situation. Let me illustrate with a story about a guy named Thomas, who's a pilot for a major airline. Thomas told me about a flight he was on. He was flying a 737 from Denver to Miami with 156 passengers on board. About 40 minutes into the flight, at 35,000 feet, one of the engines failed. Not sputtered, not malfunctioned, failed. Completely shut down. In the cockpit, alarms were going off, warning lights were flashing, and through the windows, Thomas could see smoke coming from the engine. His co-pilot, who was less experienced, immediately started talking fast. "Oh my God, what do we do? Should we turn back? Should we?" Thomas, according to him, felt his heart racing, felt the adrenaline surge, felt the fear, but he didn't act on it. He said, in the calmest voice he could manage, "I've got the controls. Let's run the checklist." They went through the emergency procedures, step by step, by the book. The plane was designed to fly on one engine. They were never actually in danger of crashing. But if Thomas had panicked, if he'd made impulsive decisions, if he'd let his fear control his actions, that's when things could have gone very wrong. They diverted to the nearest airport, landed safely. Everyone walked off the plane fine. But here's the interesting part. Thomas told me that in the cabin, most passengers didn't even know there was a problem until after they landed. Why? Because the flight attendants stayed calm. They followed their training. They didn't run around panicking. They projected an energy of everything is under control. And because the flight attendants were calm, the passengers stayed calm. That's leadership in chaos, not having all the answers, not being fearless, but managing your own state so you can make clear decisions and help others feel safe. This is a skill you can develop. It's not something you're born with. It's something you practice. Here's how. 1. Prepare for chaos before it happens. Most people's first experience with real crisis is the actual crisis. That's when they learn whether they're someone who panics or someone who stays calm. But calm people prepare. They think through scenarios before they happen. If this went wrong, what would I do? They rehearse responses. They familiarize themselves with emergency procedures, backup plans, worst-case scenarios, not because they're pessimists, but because familiarity breeds calm. When something bad happens and you've already thought through how you'd handle it, your brain doesn't interpret it as a brand new threat. It interprets it as a situation I've prepared for. That small shift makes a massive difference in your stress response. 2. Focus on what you can control. In chaos, there's always a long list of things you can't control. And if you focus on those things, you'll spiral into helplessness and panic. Calm people immediately do a mental sort. What can I control? What can I influence? What is completely outside my control? Then they put 100% of their energy into the first category, some energy into the second category, and zero energy into the third category. When my agency was falling apart that Tuesday morning, I couldn't control that the servers had crashed. I couldn't control that the client had left. I couldn't control that people were resigning. But I could control how I responded. I could control the plan we put in place. I could control the energy I brought to the team. That's where I put my focus. And that focus created calm. 3. Slow down your physical body. Here's something most people don't realize. Your emotional state follows your physical state. When you're panicking, your breathing is shallow and fast. Your muscles are tense. Your movements are jerky and rushed. But here's the hack. You can reverse engineer calm by changing your physiology. Deliberately slow your breathing. Take deep breaths. In for 4 counts, out for 6 counts. Relax your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Slow down your movements. Walk slower. Talk slower. Move with intention instead of rushing. Your brain gets the message, if my body is this relaxed, the situation must not be that dangerous. And your stress response starts to dial down. Rachel, the ER nurse, told me they teach this explicitly in medical training. In a trauma situation, we're taught to consciously slow down our movements, not because we have extra time, we don't, but because slow, intentional movements are more precise, and they keep us from spiraling into panic. 4. Become the narrator, not the character. This is a mental technique that's incredibly powerful. When you're in the middle of chaos, you're the character in the story. Everything is happening to you. You're reactive, emotional, overwhelmed. But you can shift perspectives. You can become the narrator. Instead of, oh my God, everything is falling apart and I don't know what to do, you think. This is a challenging situation. Multiple things are going wrong simultaneously. The character in this story is feeling overwhelmed. What would be the wise next move? That tiny shift from I'm drowning to the character is facing a challenge creates just enough emotional distance to think clearly. It's not dissociation, it's perspective. 5. Remember, you've survived 100% of your worst days so far. This one is simple but profound. Whatever crisis you're facing right now, however overwhelming it feels, you faced hard things before, and you made it through. Every crisis you survived has given you tools, resilience, experience. You're not starting from zero. You're starting from person who has already proven they can handle difficult things. That knowledge creates calm. Let me tell you about one more person who embodies this principle. My friend Daniel, who's a firefighter in Phoenix, Arizona. Daniel runs into burning buildings for a living, literally. His job is to go toward danger when everyone else is running away. I asked him once, how do you not freeze up? How do you function when there's fire all around you and people are screaming and everything is chaos? He said, the first time I went into a real fire, I was terrified, absolutely terrified. But my training kicked in. I had practiced this scenario 100 times in controlled conditions. So even though I was scared, I knew what to do. Now, after 10 years, I'm still scared sometimes. Fear is healthy. It keeps you alert. But I'm not panicked because I've been through this before. I know that I can function in chaos. I've proven it to myself over and over. And here's what I tell the rookies. The goal isn't to not feel fear. The goal is to act effectively despite the fear. Calm isn't the absence of fear. Calm is the management of fear. That's the mindset shift. You're not trying to become a robot who feels nothing. You're trying to become someone who can feel the fear, acknowledge it, and still make clear decisions. Here's what happens when you become that person. People trust you, not because you're perfect, not because you have all the answers, but because when things get hard, you don't fall apart. And in a world where most people crumble under pressure, someone who stays solid becomes incredibly valuable. They become the person others turn to, the person others rely on, the person others follow. That's not about title or position. It's about presence. In chaos, the calmest person in the room becomes the leader by default. Not because they appointed themselves, but because everyone else looks to them for stability. That's the silent advantage in action. So the next time you find yourself in chaos, and you will, because chaos is part of life, remember, your job isn't to fix everything immediately. Your job isn't to have all the answers. Your job isn't even to make the fear go away. Your job is to stay calm enough to think clearly, act intentionally, and help others feel safe. Do that, and you'll be amazed at how situations that seemed impossible start to become manageable. Do that, and you'll be amazed at how people start to see you differently. Do that, and you'll be amazed at how you start to see yourself differently. Because the person who can stay calm in chaos isn't just valuable to others, they're free. Free from being controlled by circumstances. Free from being a victim of their own emotions. Free to respond instead of react. And that freedom, that's the ultimate form of power. Lesson 5. The clear lens. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you made a decision that you genuinely felt good about? Not a decision that worked out by luck. Not a decision that someone else made for you, but a decision where you thought clearly, weighed your options, and chose with confidence. If you're struggling to remember, you're not alone. Most people go through life making decisions in a fog, a mental fog created by stress, emotion, distraction, other people's opinions, and the constant noise of modern life. And then they wonder why their decisions keep leading them in directions they don't want to go. Here's the truth. The quality of your life is directly determined by the quality of your decisions. And the quality of your decisions is directly determined by the clarity of your mind. If your mind is clouded by anxiety, by anger, by confusion, by overwhelm, your decisions will reflect that cloudiness. They'll be reactive, short-sighted, emotionally driven, and you'll regret them. But if your mind is clear, calm, focused, rational, your decisions will reflect that clarity. They'll be strategic, thoughtful, aligned with your actual goals, and they'll serve you long-term. This is the 5th dimension of the silent advantage, mental clarity. And it's not something that just happens to you. It's something you actively create and protect. Let me tell you about a period in my life when I had zero mental clarity. It was about 6 years ago. I was working a corporate job in Los Angeles that I hated. I was in a relationship that wasn't working. I was living in an expensive apartment I couldn't really afford because I thought it would make me happy. I was saying yes to social obligations I didn't want because I felt obligated. Every single day felt like I was moving through mud. I was constantly tired, constantly stressed, constantly making decisions that I knew weren't right for me. But I couldn't figure out what the right decisions even were. I'd lie awake at night, overthinking everything. Should I quit my job? Should I end my relationship? Should I move to a different city? What am I even doing with my life? My mind was like a browser with 50 tabs open. Everything was running at once. Nothing was getting full attention, and the whole system was on the verge of crashing. I remember one specific moment. That was the wake-up call. I was sitting in a coffee shop, supposed to be working on a presentation, and I just couldn't. My mind was jumping between worrying about the presentation, replaying an argument I'd had with my girlfriend that morning, stressing about money, thinking about an awkward interaction with my boss, wondering if I should go to my friend's party that weekend or make up an excuse, feeling guilty about not calling my mom back, and on and on. I literally couldn't hold a single thought for more than 30 seconds, and I realized I have zero control over my own mind. That terrified me, because if you can't control your own thoughts, what can you control? That was the moment I started taking mental clarity seriously, not as a nice to have, but as a necessity. And here's what I learned. Mental clarity is like physical fitness. It requires consistent practice, discipline, and the right habits. Most people think clarity is something that either happens to you or doesn't. Like luck. Like some people are just naturally clear-headed. That's not true. Clarity is a skill. And like any skill, you can develop it. Let me break down what creates mental fog, and then we'll talk about how to clear it. The sources of mental fog. 1. Information overload. Your brain has a limited capacity for processing information. When you exceed that capacity, everything becomes fuzzy. Think about what you consume in a typical day. News, social media, emails, messages, podcasts, videos, articles, conversations, advertisements, notifications. Your brain is trying to process thousands of inputs every single day. It's not designed for that. It's designed for a much slower, much quieter environment. The result? Cognitive exhaustion, decision fatigue, mental fog. 2. Unresolved emotional clutter. Every unresolved conflict, every suppressed emotion, every conversation you're avoiding, they're all running in the background of your mind, consuming processing power. It's like having dozens of apps running on your phone at the same time. Even if you're not actively using them, they're draining your battery. That fight you had with your friend 3 weeks ago that you never addressed, still running in the background. That thing your boss said that made you feel inadequate, still running. That breakup from 2 years ago that you never fully processed, definitely still running. All of that is creating fog. 3. Lack of priorities. When everything feels important, nothing is actually important. And when you don't know what's important, every decision becomes difficult. Should you work on Project A or Project B? Both seem important. Should you go to the gym or work late? Both seem necessary. Should you spend time with friends or work on your side business? Both seem valuable. Without clear priorities, your mind is constantly wrestling with itself, trying to figure out what to focus on. That internal wrestling match is exhausting and creates massive mental fog. 4. Physical depletion. Your mind and body are not separate systems. When your body is depleted from lack of sleep, poor nutrition, no exercise, too much alcohol or caffeine, your mental clarity suffers dramatically. I can always tell when I'm not sleeping enough because my thinking becomes muddled. Simple decisions feel overwhelming. I can't focus. I become indecisive and reactive. Your brain is a physical organ. It requires proper fuel, rest, and maintenance. Neglect those, and it won't function clearly. 5. Constant context switching. This is a huge one that most people don't recognize. Every time you switch from one task to another, checking your phone while working, starting a new project before finishing the old one, jumping between different types of work, there's a cognitive cost. Your brain needs time to fully engage with a task. When you're constantly switching, you never achieve deep focus on anything. You're always operating at a surface level. And surface level engagement creates surface level clarity, which is to say, not much clarity at all. Now, here's the good news. Once you understand what creates fog, you can start clearing it. Let me share the practices that transformed my mental clarity from zero to actually functional. Practice number 1, the morning clarity ritual. This was the single most impactful change I made. I used to start my day by immediately checking my phone. Email, texts, news, social media. Within 15 minutes of waking up, I'd already filled my mind with dozens of other people's priorities, problems, and perspectives. My mental clarity was destroyed before the day even started. Now, I have a rule. The first hour of my day is input-free. No phone, no news, no email, no social media. Instead, I do this. 10 minutes of meditation or just sitting quietly. 20 minutes of journaling, stream of consciousness, getting thoughts out of my head onto paper. 30 minutes of either reading something meaningful or working on a personal project. That's it. That 1 hour sets the tone for my entire day. Why does this work? Because I'm starting the day with my thoughts, my priorities, my clarity, not reacting to everyone else's demands. By the time I check my phone, my mind is already clear and focused. The external noise can't cloud it as easily. Practice number 2, the priority pyramid. This is a framework I developed to cut through decision fog. Here's how it works. You identify your top 3 priorities for this season of your life. Not 10 priorities, not 5. 3. For me right now, it's health, physical, and mental. Building my business. Key relationships. Partner, family, close friends. Everything else is secondary. When I have to make a decision, I filter it through these 3 priorities. Does this decision support one of my top 3? If yes, strong consideration. If no, probably a no. This simple filter eliminates about 80% of decision fog, because most decisions become obvious when you have clear priorities. Someone invites me to a networking event. Does it support my top 3 priorities? Not really. Easy no. I'm tired and considering skipping the gym. Does the gym support my number 1 priority? Yes. So I go. Clear priorities create clear decisions. Practice number 3, the brain dump. This is something I do every Sunday evening and any time I feel mental fog building up. I take a blank piece of paper and I write down everything that's occupying space in my mind. Worries, tasks, ideas, conflicts, questions, decisions I need to make, things I'm avoiding, everything. I don't organize it. I don't analyze it. I just get it out of my head and onto paper. Then I do a second pass where I sort everything into 3 categories. Action required, things I can actually do something about. Waiting/monitoring, things I'm waiting on or just need to keep an eye on. Let go, things outside my control or not actually important. The action required items go into my task system with specific next steps. The waiting/monitoring items go on a separate list I review weekly. The let go items, I literally crumple up that part of the paper and throw it away. physical act of releasing it. This process takes maybe 20 minutes, and it clears my mental RAM instantly. Practice number 4. Single tasking blocks. I used to pride myself on multitasking. I thought it meant I was productive and efficient. I was wrong. I was just scattered and ineffective. Now I work in single task blocks. 90-minute focus sessions on one thing. Phone on airplane mode. Email closed. Door closed if I'm in an office. Just me and the task. The difference in mental clarity is night and day. When you're multitasking, your mind is fragmented. When you're single-tasking, your mind is unified, whole, clear. And here's what's interesting. I get more done in 3 90-minute focused blocks than I used to get done in an entire scattered 8-hour workday. Because clarity is efficiency. Practice number 5. The Decision Journal. This is a practice I learned from a mentor, and it's been transformative for building better decision-making over time. Whenever I make a significant decision, I write down what the decision is, what factors I'm considering, what I expect the outcome to be, how I'm feeling about it. Then 3 months later, I review it. What actually happened? Was my reasoning sound? What did I learn? This practice has made me so much better at recognizing my own patterns. I can see when I make good decisions, usually when I'm calm and have taken time to think, versus bad decisions, usually when I'm rushed, emotional, or trying to please someone else. Over time, this builds decision-making clarity. You learn to recognize what good decision-making feels like versus what impulsive or clouded decision-making feels like. Now, let me tell you about someone who embodies mental clarity better than almost anyone I know. Her name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She's a neurosurgeon in Boston. Think about the mental clarity required for her job. She's operating on people's brains. One wrong move, one moment of clouded judgment, and someone could die or be permanently damaged. The level of focus and clarity required is insane. I asked her once, how do you maintain that level of mental clarity, especially when you're doing 12-hour surgeries? She said, I have to protect my clarity like my life depends on it, because other people's lives literally do depend on it. She told me about her practices. I don't drink alcohol. I don't consume caffeine after noon. I'm in bed by 10 p.m. every night. I meditate for 20 minutes every morning. I exercise 6 days a week. I say no to almost all social obligations that aren't with my closest people. I don't watch the news. I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb most of the day. I said, that sounds restrictive. She smiled. To some people, maybe. But to me, it's freedom, because I'm free from mental fog. I'm free from the anxiety and confusion that most people live with. My mind is clear, and that clarity allows me to do work that matters and live a life I actually enjoy. That conversation shifted my perspective. I realized that what looks like restriction is actually protection. Protection of your most valuable asset, a clear mind. Most people have it backwards. They think freedom is saying yes to everything, consuming everything, experiencing everything. But that's not freedom. That's chaos masquerading as freedom. Real freedom is a clear mind that can make intentional choices. Let me give you another example from a completely different domain. My friend Marcus is a professional poker player in Las Vegas. He makes his living by making better decisions than his opponents at a card table. Mental clarity is literally his job. He told me, The best poker players aren't the ones who know the most about poker theory. They're the ones who can think clearly under pressure, who can read situations accurately, who don't let emotion cloud their judgment. I've seen incredibly smart players lose fortunes because they couldn't maintain mental clarity. One bad beat, and they're tilted, making emotional decisions, chasing losses. Their IQ drops by 50 points because their mind is foggy with anger and frustration. The players who consistently win are the ones who can clear the fog, who can take a beat, reset, and come back with a clear mind. He has a practice that I found fascinating. Between hands, he does a clarity check. He takes a deep breath. He asks himself, am I thinking clearly right now, or am I in my emotions? If he's in his emotions, he takes a break, gets up from the table, walks around, doesn't make any important decisions until he's clear again. He said, that one practice has probably saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars, because the clearest mind wins. This applies far beyond poker. In business, the clearest strategic thinking wins. In relationships, the clearest communication wins. In conflict, the clearest understanding of the actual issue wins. In personal growth, the clearest self-awareness wins. Clarity is the ultimate competitive advantage. Now, let me address something important. Mental clarity doesn't mean having all the answers. Some people think, if my mind was clear, I'd know exactly what to do in every situation. That's not how it works. Mental clarity means you can see the situation accurately. You can think through your options without fog. You can make a decision based on reason rather than emotion or impulse. But it doesn't mean you'll always know the right answer. Sometimes there isn't one right answer. What clarity gives you is the ability to make the best decision possible, given the information you have, and then commit to it without endless second-guessing. Let me share a personal example. 2 years ago, I had to make a major decision: stay in New York, where I had built my career and network, or move to a smaller city where my partner had gotten an incredible job opportunity. This was a genuinely difficult decision. There were strong arguments on both sides. My career was in New York. My entire professional network was there, but my relationship was important, and this opportunity for my partner was huge. I spent weeks in decision fog, going back and forth, making pro/con lists, talking to friends, overthinking it constantly. Then I used my clarity practices. I did a massive brain dump. I got clear on my priorities. Key relationships was number 3 on my list, remember? I gave myself a week to think about it without discussing it with anyone, just processing internally. And then, from that clear space, I made the decision. We'd move. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if that was the right decision in some cosmic sense. Maybe staying in New York would have led to an incredible career opportunity. Maybe moving will turn out to be a mistake. I genuinely don't know. But what I do know is I made that decision from a place of clarity. I wasn't running from something. I wasn't trying to please someone. I wasn't acting from fear or anxiety. I thought it through clearly and made a choice aligned with my values. And because of that, I don't second-guess it. I made the decision, and now I'm committed to making it work. That's the gift of mental clarity. Not certainty, but commitment. Not perfect answers, but clear thinking. Here's what I want you to take away from this lesson. Your mind is your primary tool for navigating life. If that tool is foggy, distracted, and cluttered, everything becomes harder. But if you invest in clearing your mind through consistent practices, through protecting your mental space, through being intentional about what you allow in, everything becomes easier. Decisions become clearer. Conversations become more productive. Work becomes more focused. Relationships become healthier. Stress decreases. Effectiveness increases, not because your circumstances changed, but because you're seeing and thinking about those circumstances more clearly. Start small. Pick one practice from this chapter. Maybe it's the morning clarity ritual. Maybe it's the priority pyramid. Maybe it's the weekly brain dump. Do it consistently for 30 days. Notice what changes. My guess? You'll notice that your life doesn't feel as overwhelming anymore. Not because you have fewer responsibilities, but because you're thinking about them more clearly. And that clarity, that ability to see and think without fog, that's one of the most valuable skills you can develop. Because in a world where most people are stumbling through a mental fog, the person who can see clearly has an enormous advantage. The silent advantage. Lesson 6. The unpredictable advantage. Let's talk about something that nobody wants to admit, but everyone knows is true. Not everyone in your life wants what's best for you. Some people are actively competing with you. Some people want to see you fail. Some people will try to manipulate you, undermine you, or use you for their own benefit. I know that sounds cynical, but it's reality. And if you go through life being completely transparent, completely predictable, completely reactive, you're making yourself an easy target. This is the 6th and final dimension of the silent advantage, and it's perhaps the most sophisticated, strategic unpredictability. The ability to be so calm, so controlled, so measured in your responses that other people can't read you, can't predict you, can't manipulate you, not because you're being dishonest or fake, but because you're operating from a place of such self-control that you're not giving away your next move. Let me tell you a story that perfectly illustrates this principle. I have a friend named Alex who works in commercial real estate in Manhattan. High-stakes negotiations. Millions of dollars on the line, egos everywhere, aggressive personalities. Alex is not a naturally aggressive person. He's calm, soft-spoken, actually kind of gentle in his demeanor. When he first started in the industry, people walked all over him. They saw his calmness as weakness. They'd make low-ball offers. They'd use aggressive tactics. They'd try to pressure him into bad deals. Alex could have responded by becoming more aggressive, by matching their energy, by trying to out-intimidate them. But he didn't. Instead, he did something much smarter. He became strategically unpredictable. Here's what he told me. In negotiations, most people are easy to read. If they're aggressive, you know they'll push hard. If they're friendly, you know they're trying to build rapport to get you to like them. If they're rushed, you know they're under time pressure. But I realized, what if I don't give them anything to read? What if I'm just calm, no matter what they do? So Alex developed a practice. In negotiations, regardless of the offer, regardless of the tactic, regardless of the pressure, his response was the same. Calm, measured, unreadable. Someone makes an insulting lowball offer. Alex doesn't get offended, doesn't argue, just sits there calmly and says, "Interesting, let me think about that." Someone tries to create artificial urgency. "We need to close this deal today or we're walking." Alex doesn't panic, doesn't rush, just says, I understand your timeline. I'll get back to you when I've reviewed everything thoroughly. Someone tries to use personal rapport to manipulate him? Come on, Alex, we're friends here. You can give me a better deal than that. Alex stays professional. I appreciate our relationship. My offer stands. Here's what happened. People stopped being able to predict his moves. They couldn't tell if he was bluffing or serious. They couldn't tell if their tactics were working or failing. They couldn't read his emotional state. And that uncertainty made them nervous. When you can't read someone, you can't control them. And when you can't control them, they have the power. Alex told me about one particular deal where this played out perfectly. He was negotiating to buy a commercial building. The seller was a guy named Richard, who was known for being tough and aggressive. Richard started with an asking price that was 30% above market value. Most buyers would have either walked away immediately or started arguing about how unreasonable the price was. Alex didn't either. He just said, "Okay, I'll review the financials and get back to you." He waited 3 days, didn't call, didn't email, just silence. Richard called him. "So, what do you think about my price?" Alex calmly, "Still reviewing. I'll be in touch." Another 4 days of silence. Richard called again. Now he was getting anxious. "Look, I'm getting other offers. If you're interested, you need to move quickly." Alex, "I understand. Take the other offers if they're better. I'm still doing my due diligence." The thing is, Alex already knew there weren't other serious offers. He'd done his research, but he didn't reveal that. 2 weeks later, Richard called him again. The swagger was gone from his voice. "Okay, what's your offer?" Alex came in 25% below the original asking price, and Richard accepted. Why? Because Alex's calmness had confused him. Richard couldn't tell if Alex was desperately interested or completely indifferent. That uncertainty made him second-guess his own position. Alex's calm, unpredictable demeanor had won the negotiation without him having to be aggressive or manipulative. This is the principle. When you're predictable, you're controllable. When you're unpredictable, you're powerful. Now, let me be very clear about something. Strategic unpredictability is not the same as being erratic or unstable. Erratic people are unpredictable because they're out of control. They don't know what they're going to do next because they're ruled by their emotions. That's not power. That's chaos. Strategic unpredictability means you're completely in control, but others can't see your control. You know exactly what you're doing and why, but you're not broadcasting it. You're not giving away your strategy. You're not showing your cards. Let me give you another example from a completely different domain. I know a woman named Lisa, who's a criminal defense attorney in Chicago. Her job is literally to defend people against prosecutors who are trying to put them in prison. The prosecutors she faces are skilled, aggressive, and they have the full power of the state behind them. They're trying to predict her defense strategy so they can counter it. Lisa told me, "The worst thing I can do is be predictable. If the prosecution knows what I'm going to argue, they can prepare for it. They can shut it down. So I stay quiet. I don't telegraph my strategy. I don't get emotional in court. I don't react visibly to their arguments. I stay completely neutral." And it drives them crazy. They can't tell if their arguments are landing or not. They can't tell if I'm worried or confident. They can't read me. That uncertainty makes them make mistakes. They over-prepare for strategies I'm not using. They waste time on arguments that don't matter. They second-guess themselves. Lisa's calmness isn't passive. It's a strategic weapon. By staying unreadable, she controls the psychological battlefield. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but I'm not in high-stakes negotiations or courtroom battles. How does this apply to my everyday life? Great question. Let me show you. Application number 1, workplace dynamics. You know that coworker who's always trying to push your buttons? The one who makes passive-aggressive comments, trying to get a reaction out of you? Most people either A, get visibly upset, which gives the person exactly what they want, B, fire back with their own passive-aggressive comment, which escalates the conflict. Both responses are predictable, and predictable responses can be manipulated. Here's the strategic unpredictability play. No visible reaction whatsoever. They make a snide comment. You stay completely calm. You might acknowledge it with a simple noted or interesting perspective, then move on with your day. No defensiveness, no counterattack, no emotion, just calm acknowledgement and continuation. This confuses them. They were expecting a reaction. When they don't get one, they don't know what to do next. Their tactic failed, but they don't know why. And here's what happens. They usually stop, because the behavior isn't giving them the payoff they're looking for. Application number 2, personal relationships. Let's say you're in a relationship with someone who uses emotional manipulation. They know that certain things they say or do will trigger certain reactions from you. Maybe they know that if they threaten to leave, you'll panic and do whatever they want. Maybe they know that if they give you the silent treatment, you'll apologize for things you didn't even do. Maybe they know that if they compare you to their ex, you'll get insecure and try harder to please them. These are manipulation tactics that work because you're predictable. The strategic unpredictability response. Break the pattern. They threaten to leave. Instead of panicking, you calmly say, I'd be sad if you left, but I respect your decision. Do what you need to do. They give you the silent treatment. Instead of chasing them, you give them space. You go about your day calmly. They compare you to their ex. Instead of getting defensive, you say, sounds like your ex was great. I hope you find what you're looking for. These responses confuse manipulators because they're not getting the reaction they're accustomed to. And when manipulation doesn't work, manipulators either A, stop the behavior, or B, reveal themselves more clearly as manipulative, which gives you the clarity you need to make decisions about the relationship. Either way, you win by being unpredictable. Application number 3, competitive situations. Whether it's a job interview, a sports competition, or any scenario where you're being evaluated against others, strategic unpredictability gives you an edge. Most people in competitive situations are easy to read. They're nervous, so they overtalk. They're trying to impress, so they brag. They're insecure, so they put others down. All predictable behaviors. You know what's unpredictable in these contexts? Calm confidence. Not arrogance, not false bravado. Just genuine, quiet confidence. You don't need to dominate the conversation. You don't need to prove yourself. You're just present, engaged, thoughtful, calm. This is disarming because it's so rare. Interviewers, competitors, evaluators, They're used to people who are trying hard to impress them. When they encounter someone who's just genuinely comfortable in their own skin, it stands out. Let me tell you about my friend Jordan, who's a professional tennis player. Jordan is ranked in the top 100 in the world. Not the very top, but high enough to compete against the best players regularly. I asked him once, when you're playing against someone who's technically better than you, how do you compete? He said, I confuse them. Most players have patterns. If they're winning, they play a certain way. If they're losing, they panic and change their game. They're predictable. But I stay the same. Winning or losing, my demeanor doesn't change, my intensity doesn't change, my strategy doesn't change until I deliberately choose to change it. This messes with opponents psychologically. They can't tell if I'm worried or confident. They can't tell if their game is working or not. That uncertainty creates doubt in their mind, and doubt creates mistakes. Jordan's not necessarily more skilled than his opponents, but his psychological game, his strategic unpredictability, gives him an edge. Now, here's something crucial to understand. Strategic unpredictability requires incredible self-control. It's easy to react. It's easy to show your emotions. It's easy to be readable. What's hard is maintaining composure when someone is deliberately trying to provoke you. What's hard is staying calm when your instinct is to fight back or defend yourself. But that's exactly why it's powerful. Anyone can be aggressive. Anyone can be reactive. Anyone can show emotion. But being strategically calm, being intentionally unreadable, that takes discipline. And that discipline is what separates people who are controlled by their circumstances from people who control their circumstances. Let me share one final story that brings all of this together. There's a CEO I know named Patricia who runs a tech company in San Francisco. Her company was going through a hostile takeover attempt by a much larger competitor. The competitor's strategy was psychological warfare. They leaked rumors to the press about Patricia's company failing. They poached key employees with huge offers. They made public statements undermining confidence in Patricia's leadership. They were trying to create panic, trying to make Patricia react emotionally, trying to force her into desperate moves. Everyone was watching to see how Patricia would respond. And Patricia? She said nothing publicly, made no defensive statements, made no counterattacks, just continued running her company. Internally, she was working with her board on a strategy, but externally, completely calm, completely unreadable. The competitor couldn't tell if their tactics were working. Was Patricia panicking? Was she unfazed? Was she preparing a countermove? They had no idea. This uncertainty made them nervous. They escalated their tactics, which made them look increasingly desperate and aggressive to the public. Meanwhile, Patricia calmly secured additional funding from investors who believed in her long-term vision. She retained most of her key employees by having honest, calm conversations about the situation. She continued executing her business plan. 6 months later, the hostile takeover attempt fell apart. The competitor withdrew. Patricia's company not only survived, but came out stronger because the adversity had unified her team and attracted supportive investors. After it was all over, I asked Patricia, "How did you stay so calm through all of that? Weren't you terrified?" She said, "Of course I was terrified, but I knew that if I showed that fear, it would become contagious. My team would panic. Investors would pull out. customers would lose confidence. So I made a decision. Publicly, I would be completely unreadable. They wouldn't know if I was scared or confident. They wouldn't know my next move. I would give them nothing to work with. And privately, I would process my fear with my therapist and close advisors. But that fear would never leak into my public presence. That separation between internal experience and external presentation. That's what strategic unpredictability is. It's not about denying your emotions. It's about choosing when and how to express them. That's the final lesson I want you to take from this entire guide. The silent advantage is not about suppressing who you are. It's about mastering when and how you reveal who you are. It's about having such complete self-control that you get to choose your responses instead of being controlled by your reactions. It's about being so grounded in yourself that external circumstances can't shake you. It's about being so strategic in your thinking that you're always 3 steps ahead. It's about understanding that in a world full of reactive, predictable, emotionally driven people, the person who is calm, strategic, and unreadable has an enormous advantage. Not an advantage that hurts others, but an advantage that protects you and allows you to navigate life's challenges with grace and effectiveness. The final synthesis, living the silent advantage. So here we are, 6 lessons, 6 dimensions of the silent advantage. Lesson 1, respond, don't react. You've learned that the gap between stimulus and response is where your power lives. That pause, that moment of choice, that's your freedom. Lesson 2, saving energy. You've learned that energy is your most valuable resource, that treating it carelessly is the fastest way to exhaust yourself and achieve nothing. Lesson 3, the power of silence. You've learned that silence is not weakness, it's strategic strength, that the person who talks the most usually has the least power. Lesson 4, trust in chaos. You've learned that in crisis, people don't follow the person with all the answers. They follow the person who's calm, and your calm creates trust. Lesson 5, clarity of mind. You've learned that mental fog is the enemy of good decision-making, that protecting your mental clarity is protecting your ability to navigate life effectively. Lesson 6, confusing the opponent. You've learned that being strategically unpredictable, calm when others expect panic, silent when others expect reaction, gives you psychological leverage. These aren't 6 separate skills. They're 6 facets of the same diamond, self-mastery. Because that's what the silent advantage really is. It's not a trick or a tactic. It's a fundamental shift in how you relate to yourself and the world. Most people are controlled by their circumstances. Their mood depends on what happens to them. Their decisions are driven by their emotions. Their effectiveness is determined by external factors. But when you develop the silent advantage, you flip that script. You're no longer controlled by your circumstances. You respond to them intentionally. Your mood is stable because it's generated internally, not dependent on external events. Your decisions are clear because you've cultivated mental clarity. Your effectiveness is high because you're strategic about where you invest your energy. And here's what's beautiful about this. As you develop these qualities, your entire life changes. Your relationships improve because you're no longer reactive and dramatic. Your career advances because you're seen as reliable, strategic, and unflappable. Your stress decreases because you're not wasting energy on things that don't matter. Your confidence increases because you trust yourself to handle whatever comes. You become the kind of person that others admire and respect, even if they can't quite articulate why. You become the calm in the storm, the steady presence, the person others turn to when things get hard, not because you're perfect, not because you have all the answers, but because you've mastered yourself. And self-mastery is the foundation of every other kind of success. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one lesson from this guide and implement it this week. Maybe it's practicing the pause before you respond. Maybe it's doing an energy audit of your day and cutting out one major energy drain. Maybe it's trying strategic silence in a situation where you'd normally over-explain. Maybe it's using one of the mental clarity practices. Just one. Start there. And as that becomes natural, add another and another. Over time, these practices compound. They build on each other. And gradually, you'll notice that you're operating at a completely different level than you used to. You'll notice that things that used to throw you off don't anymore. You'll notice that you're making better decisions with less effort. You'll notice that people treat you differently, with more respect, more deference, more trust. And you'll realize this is what it feels like to have the silent advantage, to be calm in a chaotic world, to be clear in a confused world, to be strategic in a reactive world, to be powerful without being loud. That's the gift of the silent advantage, and it's available to anyone willing to do the work of mastering themselves. So go, practice, implement. Become the calm, clear, strategic person you're capable of being. The world needs more people like that. Be one of them.